This year marks 250 years since the start of the American Revolution. McCarthy Principal Jeff Parks explains how Chelmsford honors a Revolutionary War hero right here at the Parker Middle School.
For years, when I was the principal here and just growing up in town, we had a big sign that said Parker Middle School. And when I was principal here, it was time to upgrade and update the sign. And I thought it was critical that we put Lieutenant Colonel Moses Parker on the sign, which gave people a lot more context instead of just, the name Parker. Moses Parker is a Chelmsford resident, was a Chelmsford resident, grew up in town. The school was ultimately named after him for his, heroic efforts in the Revolutionary War. He led troops in the Battle of Bunker Hill, ultimately Breed's Hill, but the Battle of Bunker Hill as we know it. He started as an enlisted soldier and then was promoted to captain, and he was leading the troops in that particular battle. When he was injured in battle and ultimately died after being captured, by the English, and he succumbed to his injuries and left a legacy in the town. And so at some point in the mid to late 60s, somebody decided it was appropriate to name the school after him. And actually kind of a fun fact is the picture in the main lobby of this school shows him and his injury, and it's a portion of some very historic photographs or depictions rather that you would see that show him actually being injured. And so during that battle, he took injury, and he and several of his troops were captured, and he never made it out of that situation is really kind of how it worked. So it was interesting that they started here, Lexington and Concord, the historic things that we all talk about living in this area, but the battle continued, and the march continued all the way to Boston, and it's really fascinating to think about how these men just took on that challenge at the time and just kept going and kept going and kept going. And I think, that is one of the reasons why it's so critical that we honor him and, many other soldiers who did the same. He's like farmer one day, soldier the next, and that's just how it works. He was one of the regular, Joes, so to speak, that, they were, farmers, local leaders, laborers, you name it, and they thought it was important enough to just join the cause of the fight. And so I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate, and it's not much different today, quite honestly. I went into the Army and was in the National Guard after high school, and it's something that many friends and family members and people when you look to your left and to your right, who have also done the same, just said, I'm going to put my hand up for this because I think it's important enough to do some sort of give back for not only what we have, but to help kind of support the people who are coming through after us. So I think that's something that people should know and would probably think is a pretty cool reason why we have the school known as Parker, but it's named after somebody that was pretty important in our history. We shouldn't be focusing on remembering this date and this date and this date, and we're going to quiz you on it later, because that doesn't mean that much, right? Sure, you need to know around when things occurred, but the dialogue with students to each other and to staff and the people facilitating those discussions, helping students and everybody just understand what it was like behind that. So if we put on the sign out front, Colonel Moses Parker and his date of birth and his date of death, and that was the end of it, that doesn't mean much, right? But to be able to talk about the things that he did and why it is important, and I think those are that's the shift that we're seeing in education now, is that we want kids to be able to explain, understand, and think about why those things matter as opposed to just remembering a couple of bullet points on a piece of paper.